When I came across this next story, I thought, okay, I know we talk about, and there have been some government agencies federally that you look at numbers of how many people have been hired and you're like, really, do we need that many people? Why is the government hiring when it's whatever difficult time we're going through? But then I saw this story from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Franco Terrazzano's on the line. And I thought to myself, okay, wait a sec. This seems completely out of whack, given that we are, of course, over the past couple of years coming out of a pandemic. So I wanted to get some clarity here, and that's before we even get to the part of how much money was involved in this. So Franco, welcome. Thank you for being here. Let me start with this story. Size of government under the federal Liberals. What did you find here?
Well, not just the size of the federal government, but the size of the federal government C-suite has ballooning, right? So the topper earning government employees has completely gone out of control since 2015, okay? So what we found through an access to information request is that the total compensation paid out to federal executives has increased by more than $500 million, $571 million since 2015, okay? That's an increase of 41%. And, just to compare the numbers to see if this is totally out of whack, we looked at the inflation rate between 2015 and 2022. So while total compensation paid out to federal executives increased by 41%, inflation over that time period was less than 20%, just to put that one into perspective for you.
Okay. I mean, the numbers are huge, but again, with respect to governments, and look, governments, when they get into power, typically go out and hire. How unusual is this, maybe, is the question to ask?
Well, I mean, the total size of the bureaucracy has increased by 98,000 new employees, 40% under the Trudeau government. That's huge. That's massive, right? And the reason that this really matters for all Canadian taxpayers is that more than half of every single dollar that's spent day-to-day within the federal government is consumed by the bureaucracy, right? So when you hear these huge numbers, like the deficit this year will be about $40 billion, the deficit next year will be about $40 billion, well, there's no way to tackle the deficit in a meaning way, to chip away at that $1 trillion debt without reining in the size and cost of the bureaucracy. And, I'm a true believer that you got to go after the fat cats before you go after the little cats. So if the government is going to rein in that bureaucracy, it has to start with its executive class.
All right, so I'm going to take the other side of this because I'm sure, people will bring this up as well. We complain about government agencies that take too long. It takes too long to process stuff. That's because there aren't enough people there to be able to deal with this. So they go out and say, well, fine, let's go hire more people. Is that not a fair sort of comeback?
Well, the problem is that they've gone on a complete hiring spree and performance isn't getting any better, right? So we also looked at the performance data that's published by the federal government. This is their data. They publish it online for the last 5 years. And in the last 5 years, only 1 year did the federal government meet half of its performance targets, okay? So every other year, except for one, they meet less than half of their performance targets. So you're hiring all these new bureaucrats. You're obviously spending a ton of extra taxpayer cash, and Canadians aren't getting better results from the bureaucracy. But even besides that, right, set aside the hiring spree for a second. You also have to look at the actual compensation, right? So since 2015, the feds have handed out more than $1 billion in bonuses, right? 90% of federal government executives get a bonus every single year. So even leaving beside the fact that they went on this massive hiring spree, the federal government is also rubber stamping bonuses for the vast majority of its executives without them even being able to meet half of their own performance targets.
Okay, which I'm sure is going to bother a lot of people. I mean, the bonuses are supposed to be there when you achieve those targets, not just because you have that job. I completely understand that. Is it fair to ask you, Franco, if we look back, and I realize this government's been in power now for like 9 years. I mean, I'm going to ask you to look back to, say, the Harper government. Do we have comparisons?
So under the Harper government, they did rein in the bureaucracy, right? So there were savings made in the bureaucracy. But even looking further back, right, because let's go back to the Liberal government before the Harper government came into power.
Okay.
They took the deficit, they took the debt very seriously, right? They did a huge program spending review in the 90s. They balanced the budget. They did a lot to control spending. So hopefully this isn't a partisan issue. Hopefully we can look at this as a taxpayer issue. You see the cost and size of the bureaucracy going up. You see performance results from the federal government being dismal. So I really do hope that all taxpayers, regardless of your partisan affiliation, can be like, well, what value am I getting from all this extra money that is
Yeah.
being dumped into the federal bureaucracy in Ottawa.
You know, to your point, it's also worth noting. So we're just talking immigration over the past couple of days, talking about how difficult it is, how much time it takes, not just provincially but federally, for people who come here, be they asylum seekers or immigrants, just to be able to get papers, working documents, etc. And that's because of understaffing. So here we are with all these extra jobs that have been added. Yet, as you said, we're still not seeing the results, which kind of gives you the impression that either someone is not doing much of a job or we need to hire even more people.
Well, that's the big head scratcher, right? How do you add 98,000, which is a 40% increase to the size of the bureaucracy, and everything still seems kind of dismal, right? It wasn't too long ago that I was at the passport office, and I'm fortunate that I'm actually able to go to the office during the week without worrying about my livelihood, but I was in there for a couple hours, right? Like, imagine how hard it is for people who don't have the type of luxury to be able to go during the office hours of a work week to get something like that done from the government. So the big head scratcher here isn't just the fact that you have this total compensation for executives ballooning by $571 million under the Trudeau government, right? It's not just the fact that they've added 98,000 total bureaucrats since coming to power. It's also the fact that, we're not getting better results.
Yeah.
We're not getting better results. And at the end of the day, if you want to reduce taxes, if you want to tackle the deficit, you have to tackle this bureaucracy problem.
So let me ask you one last thing as we get set to wrap up. With respect to how much federal employees make versus what they would make in the private sector, is there a big margin there, a big difference?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to look at this, okay? So the average compensation for a federal employee, when you look at salary, bonuses, pensions, all those types of benefits, their average compensation a year is about $125,000. Okay, now the average salary, which is a little bit different, granted, the average salary for a Canadian is $67,000. Now, the data is available for all levels of government lumped together. When you look at all levels of government, then you control for things like age, work experience, different education levels. Government employees across Canada make 9% higher wages than their counterparts in the private sector. Then you add in more generous pensions, more likely to get a pension if you're working in government, more time off, things of that nature. There's a huge discrepancy between what people in government make and their similar counterparts working for a business.
You know, you said before, regardless of your political stripe, I'm wondering if this is the case. Those numbers seem quite staggering, although, again, maybe I don't know enough information, but it would seem to me this is something the opposition would want to jump all over.
Well, you would hope so, but here's a problem that's plaguing all political parties, all members of parliament. Every single year, they get a pay raise on April 1. And that has happened regardless of what has been going on in recent years, right? So during the pandemic, so many of their constituents lost a job, took a pay cut, maybe even had to take out a line of credit to keep the lights on in their business. Regardless of the struggles of their constituents, all members of parliament from all the different parties continue to take a pay raise, right? So it's very difficult for them now to take the high ground and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Bureaucrat, you deserve a pay cut, while they've been giving themselves higher pay every single year.
And that's where we're going to leave it. Franco, thank you. Appreciate having you on.
Hey, thanks for having me on
Take good care.
today.
Franco Terrazzano from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Don't really know what to say to that other than a lot of very interesting points there, right? How do you criticize someone over making more money when you yourself are getting that raise every year? And that doesn't even include talking about Quebec, where, of course, you know what happened here. Our MNA's got 30% pay hikes.